Welcome to the Dark Wilderness, where we share first-hand encounters with the unexplained. If you've had an encounter you would like to share, please leave it in the comments, or you can email it to us in the link below. If you like today's stories, please gently slap that like button and rattle in that notification bell so you can be alerted each time we upload new content. Now, let's get into today's encounter. This story comes to us from a guy named Jack, and it happened back in 2020 in the Sanilas Provincial Forest in southeastern Manitoba. Jack's a very avid deer hunter, just like myself, and he's been hunting this particular area for years. So on this morning, it was him and his buddy Mike, and they were heading out for a morning of archery hunting. So Jack said that where he normally hunts is down this gravel road. He said as you go down this gravel road, you'll get to a bit of a hill, and it dips down to a ravine. And then there's a second hill that comes up after that. He said he has two stands along this ravine. He said one is about 300 yards off that main gravel road on the north side of the ravine, and 150 yards from that on the east side, he has another stand. So on this particular morning, Jack said he was going to be hunting the stand on the north side, and his buddy Mike was going to be on the east. So when they got out there, instead of making Mike walk all the way around, Jack decided he was just going to drive him in. So when they got there, Jack went down this little windy quad trail, dropped Mike off, turned around, and made his way back to the main gravel road. He said he got to the gravel road, turned, headed for that hill. He said as soon as he got to the top of the hill, he pulled his truck over and parked on the side of the road. Same thing he does every time he goes to this stand. So he parks his truck, gets out, goes down the hill into this ravine, turns and walks the 300 yards into where he has a tree stand set up. He said he got into his stand. It was about 40 minutes before light. So he just sat there for a little while, just looking around. He said as it started to get lighter, he could see shadows in the clearing in front of him. So he's looking at these shadows. Most of the time it will just be trees, but he said he was looking at these shadows trying to figure out what they were. Now, if you're a hunter, you'll know at this particular time of day, any shadow looks like whatever you're hunting. So if you're hunting deer, every shadow will look like a deer. It doesn't matter if it's a small little shadow or a big shadow, it'll look like a deer to you. Same if you're bear hunting or moose hunting. Doesn't matter. It's just your mind and the light plays tricks on your mind. So he's looking at all these shadows. He can't shoot them yet, but he's just curious to try to figure out what they are. So he's sitting there looking out into his clearing. And now it's about 5 minutes before legal light. He said all of a sudden behind him, he hears this scream. And he said this scream kind of sounded like a woman screaming, but it was more raspy and more drawn out. He said he's never heard anything like this before. And this guy's hunted pretty much everything in the province. And on top of that, he said that he's had multiple run-ins with cougars, which he's admitted he's heard that can sound like women screaming. He said, but he's heard that noise from cougars before. He said what was behind him was not that. He's had two lynx fight pretty much right under his stand, and he said that noise was not that either. He said he can't explain what this noise was, and he has no idea what it was. So he hears this scream behind him, and now he's a little on edge. So he's looking around, trying to figure out what that was. So after a couple minutes, he pulls his cell phone out and looks, and Mike had actually sent him a text, and the text literally read, "What in the actual F was that?" See, Mike's been hunting for a very long time too, and according to Jack, Mike has never heard that sound ever before either. So both of these hunters were at a complete loss for what could have made this noise. So they sat for the morning hunt, and then they met back at Jack's truck. Jack said that Mike said shortly after that scream, he could hear something big moving through the ravine behind him. He said he heard it coming from the road, and then it turned, followed the ravine through all the way to that quad trail that Jack had driven down to drop him off in the morning. Mike told Jack that he never saw anything. He didn't want to turn around. He didn't really want to see whatever that made that noise was. So They talked it over a little bit, but at this point, Mike had to actually be at work that afternoon, so they actually had to leave. The next day, Jack was going out hunting with his buddy Brandon. So they were only going for the evening this time. So that evening they got out there, it was about 3 hours before dark. And even though there was this scream situation the morning before, Jack really had his heart set on hunting his main stand because he's had trail cameras up there, he said, for years. And this particular season he had cams up for a couple of months, and he had a couple really nice bucks that he was hoping to get one of those. So he was really gung-ho on hunting this one particular stand. So that evening when they got out there, Jack was actually going to be hunting the stand that Mike was in the day before. So they got out there. He actually drove down that main gravel road, dropped off Brandon, turned around, went down that quad trail that he had drove down to drop Mike off the morning before, and he actually drove past where he was going and then parked down this little tiny trail, parked his truck there, and then walked into that stand. Jack said he sat in the stand for a little while. About an hour before dark, he heard something from the bush in front of him over to his right. So he was focused looking that way, and he said 2 does came out. These 2 does, he said, kind of slowly grazed and meandered along the bush line, and at one point actually passed right underneath his stand. He said they slowly made their way out into the clearing. They're about 25 yards away when all of a sudden, from back towards the road, Jack heard the exact same scream that he heard the morning before. He said as soon as that scream happened, everything around him just went dead quiet. Those 2 deer that were 25, 30 yards from him instantly bedded down. Now that's not really that normal. If you're a hunter, you know if you spook a deer, normally they'll just book it. They'll blow at you and they'll book it. They won't just lie down. They'll get away from whatever's spooking them. So these 2 deer just bed down. Jack said the entire time that these deer were lying down, he said it was about 10 minutes with just pure quiet. He said that entire time he felt like he was being watched. He didn't want to turn around. He didn't want to move a muscle. After about 10 minutes, he said the noises, it was like somebody flipped a switch. All the noises came back. These 2 deer stood up and didn't even look the way the scream came from. They just booked it the complete opposite direction. So he pulls his phone out, goes to text his buddy. His buddy actually texted him, and his buddy texted the exact same thing that Mike texted him the morning before, just saying, what in the actual F was that? See, Brandon has been hunting for a super long time too, and according to Jack, even he has never heard anything like that before. And apparently, when that scream happened, Brandon was actually watching another deer in a clearing in front of him. And when that scream went off, this deer bedded down. Same thing, for 10 minutes, did not move. Once the noises came back, it got up and just booked it. So Jack says he has no idea what made this sound. He did say he does have a couple of other stories from that same area. I actually know that rough area myself. I used to hunt out in the sandy lands, not that particular spot, but I'm very familiar to terrain around there. Like he said, he's going to send me a couple more of those stories, so as soon as he sends those to me, I'll be sure to share them with you. Well, that's it for today's encounter. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.